They asked me to move tables during the wedding reception, because I didn't match their color scheme. Not politely. Not discreetly. A young woman with a headset leaned over during the salad course and whispered. The brides asked if you could switch seats. This table is for social media photos. I looked down at the butter I hadn't spread, the wine I hadn't touched, the place card with my name spelled wrong, and I stood up. I didn't argue. I didn't cry. I simply left. Not from the room. From the story. I walked past the flower wall I paid for, past the signature cocktail bar I didn't drink from, past my own son, who didn't even turn to look. And somewhere between the ballroom doors and the hotel elevator, I realized. This wasn't a mix-up. This was a message. They didn't forget me. They erased me. A silent revision to the guest list. A cleaner photo without the woman who gave too much and smiled too long. They thought I wouldn't say anything. That I'd sit there, blend in, disappear. They were almost right. But I've stayed quiet for too many years. So I gave them what they wanted, a pretty scene, no disruption. And then I gave them what they never planned for. I gave them the silence that follows the fallout. The morning of my son's wedding, I woke before the alarm. I didn't need it. I'd barely slept. The hotel room was dim and quiet, lit only by a strip of morning light slipping between the curtains. I sat at the edge of the bed, hands folded in my lap, listening to the soft hum of the air conditioner and the distant clink of room service carts in the hallway. On the chair near the window hung my dress, deep sapphire blue. I'd chosen it months ago. Not too flashy, not too plain. Elegant, with soft sleeves that draped over the part of my arms I'd grown self-conscious about. Emily had said the bridesmaids would be in champagne tones. You'll pop beautifully in pictures, she'd said. Her voice had sounded sweet, but her eyes never really met mine. Still, I smiled. I always smiled. I got ready slowly, methodically. Hair curled, then pinned. Makeup light but careful. Pearls, not real, but close enough. When I clasped them around my neck, I thought of the boy who used to pick dandelions for me on his way home from school. Daniel. I checked my phone. No messages. No updates. Just a generic reminder from the wedding planner, shuttles arrive at 10:45. Ceremony begins at noon. By the time I zipped up my dress, I could hear voices outside. Bridesmaids laughing in the hallway. A groomsman knocking too loud on a door. I waited a moment, then stepped out. No one noticed me. The chapel was stunning. Ivory columns, stained glass glowing soft reds and blues in the late morning light. I stood in the back for a while, just watching. Guests were arriving. People I didn't know. Emily's coworkers, her cousins, her college roommates. I recognized almost none of them. Daniel was at the front with the officiant, fiddling with his cufflinks. I caught his eye once. He smiled quickly, almost reflexively, then looked away before I could wave. My stomach tightened. I told myself it was nerves. A woman I didn't know approached with a headset and clipboard. Are you Margaret? I nodded. Oh great, we've got a seat for you up front, row 3. Right behind Emily's parents. You're going to look great in the wide shots. She smiled like she meant it. Like she was checking me off a list, not speaking to a mother who had put her only son through school working overnight shifts. I thanked her anyway. The ceremony began on time. A quartet played something soft and sweeping. Emily walked down the aisle in a dress that shimmered like it had its own source of light. Everyone gasped. Daniel looked at her like she was made of gold. And to be fair, she looked the part. I sat perfectly still, hands resting over my knees, blinking hard. I had helped pay for that dress. I'd never seen the final version until that moment. The vows were short. Sweet. Predictably sentimental. No mention of family, no reference to childhood or parents, just our journey, our love story, our next chapter. I clapped when everyone else clapped. I smiled when the cameras passed. I stood when they kissed. But deep inside, I felt something tug. Like a loose thread at the hem of a very expensive fabric. The kind that unravels fast if you pull too hard. After the ceremony, we stood outside the chapel while the photographers arranged the wedding party. Emily's mother held the bouquet during photos. Her father stood at Daniel's side. I was not asked to be in any picture. Not even one. No one said anything about it. Not even Daniel. I told myself not to ruin the moment. That maybe there was a plan. That maybe someone would call me in eventually. No one did. So I stood just outside the frame, adjusting my shawl and pretending not to notice. The sun was warm. The wind kept lifting the hem of my dress. I smoothed it down again and again, like that might hold something in place. The reception was at the Willow Ridge Country Club, all chandeliers and polished wood floors, floral centerpieces tall enough to block conversation. The kind of place where everything feels just a little too perfect to touch. As we arrived, a young woman with a clipboard greeted guests with bright smiles and assigned table numbers. When I gave her my name, she scanned the list, frowned slightly, then pointed toward the far side of the room. Table 19, she said. Just back there, near the service hallway. I blinked. Oh, I thought I was with family? She gave me a quick smile, already moving to the next guest. Oh, it's just temporary. We had to shift a few seats last minute for photography layout. You'll still have a great view. I nodded slowly. Not because I believed her. Because I didn't want to make a scene. Table 19 was next to a half-closed swinging door that led directly to the kitchen. Every few seconds, a waiter would push through it, carrying trays of appetizers or dirty glasses. The door creaked and slammed, again and again. The floral arrangement at my table had wilted on one side, and my chair wobbled slightly. I sat down anyway. From where I was, I could just barely see the head table, a long, candlelit spread with gold chargers and embroidered napkins. Daniel was there, laughing with Emily, his arm draped behind her chair. Her parents sat on either side, wine glasses raised, glowing. I kept expecting someone to wave me over. To say there had been a mistake. But no one came. No one even looked. The first toast began. Emily's father stood, glass in hand, beaming. To my daughter, and to the man lucky enough to marry her. Laughter. Cheers. Flashbulbs. I dabbed my lips with a napkin I had folded myself. It didn't come with the place setting. There wasn't one. Then came the salad course. A server, maybe 20 years old, nerves in her eyes, hesitated as she approached. Ma'am. I'm so sorry, but, the bride asked if you'd mind switching tables. Just for the next round of photos. I stared at her. The table you're at, she continued, it's one of the ones being filmed. For the wedding reel. She just wants everything to be cohesive. For the aesthetic. I looked down at my plate. Arugula wilting under the heat. A single cherry tomato, split open at the side. I hadn't even taken a bite. I can bring you another plate, the girl added quickly. Or if you'd prefer to wait. I stood. Not because I agreed. Not because I accepted it. But because I knew, right then, if I stayed seated, I would shatter. They didn't forget me. They didn't overlook me. They put me exactly where they thought I belonged. Out of frame. Out of the way. I walked with my hands lightly clasped in front of me, chin high. Past the bar I paid for. Past the dance floor. Past Daniel, who didn't turn his head, not even when I walked directly behind him. When I reached the hallway, I paused. Leaned lightly against the wall. The swinging door creaked open beside me, carrying a waft of kitchen heat and garlic. Somewhere, someone was arguing about gluten-free entrees. From inside the ballroom, another round of laughter exploded, sharp, sparkling. I glanced back. I caught a glimpse of Emily in her second dress, shorter, more fitted. She looked stunning. A spotlight kissed her shoulders as she danced with her father. And my son watched like it was the happiest moment of his life. I wasn't jealous. But I was tired. Tired of making myself small so other people could feel tall. Tired of showing up, only to be shown the door. I turned and walked toward the lobby. My heels echoed softly against the marble. I didn't know where I was going yet. But I knew I wouldn't sit back down. I didn't leave the venue right away. Instead, I wandered down the hallway until I found the courtroom empty and quiet. I slipped inside, took a seat on a padded bench by the window, and stared at nothing for a while. The music was muffled here, just a distant beat pulsing through the walls. I could still hear the clink of forks, the rise and fall of laughter. All the sounds of a celebration I had paid for, but wasn't part of. A woman passed by the open door. She paused, backpedaled slightly. "Oh, hi," she said. Her name tag read Samantha, Events. "Are you all right?" I nodded, polite. She stepped in, hesitated, then offered a small smile. "Sometimes it gets overwhelming, huh? These big weddings." I didn't respond. What was there to say? After a moment, she added, "We're about to do the father-daughter dance. They're asking all guests to gather around the floor." I nodded again, softer this time. "Thank you." But I didn't move. I sat there for another 10 minutes before quietly returning to the edge of the ballroom. I didn't rejoin my table. I just stood near the back wall, out of the way. Hidden in plain sight. That's when it happened. The bride, Emily, stepped onto the dance floor with her father. The band shifted into something soft and slow. She rested her head on his shoulder. He beamed like he'd just been given a second chance at youth. The lights dimmed to gold. The crowd gathered close. People wiped their eyes. Phones rose like a forest of arms. I stood there, watching. And in the middle of the dance, Emily looked directly at me. Her expression didn't falter. She didn't look surprised. Or embarrassed. Or even awkward. She just looked. Straight through me. Then turned her face back toward her father's chest and smiled. Like she had seen a window that needed closing. That was the tipping point. Not the seating. Not the salad. Not even the headset girl asking me to move. It was that look. The calm acknowledgement that I had been pushed aside, and her quiet confirmation that I was meant to be. I stepped back from the crowd. I needed air. In the lobby, I found a small alcove with 2 armchairs and a low table with wedding magazines. I sat, exhaled. My hands trembled slightly, resting on my knees. That's when I noticed the linen. The reception linens, the soft blush tablecloths trimmed in ivory lace, weren't the ones we'd originally selected. I knew because I'd been the one to approve the final invoice. These were upgrades. So were the crystal water goblets, the floral arches at the entrance, and the gold-rimmed chargers. I'd seen them listed under premium options on the vendor catalog. I had said no. And yet, there they were. I pulled out my phone, opened the wedding budget spreadsheet. I scrolled. Dates. Charges. Confirmations. Then, 2 new transactions from last week. One from the rental vendor. One from the caterer. Both processed on my credit card. Both approved without my knowledge. I tapped on one. Viewed the itemized receipt. Enhanced reception styling, it read. Table upgrades, stemware, custom place cards. A sick feeling rose in my throat. My hands went cold. I switched apps, opened Venmo. I hadn't meant to. I was just acting on instinct now. Emily's page came up first. I had sent her money last month for final fittings. At the top of her transaction feed, a note to one of her bridesmaids caught my eye. LOL, she's covering it all anyway. Go big or go home, nail polish wedding vibes. She was talking about me. I closed the app. The screen went black. I didn't cry. I didn't scream. Something sharper settled into my chest. Not rage. Not grief. Clarity. And for the first time that day, maybe in years, I felt still. Not broken. Just done. I got back to the hotel just before 10. The reception was still going, but I was done pretending. I took off my shoes the moment the door clicked shut. My feet were red, indented at the straps. I'd worn them all day without complaint. That felt symbolic now, discomfort swallowed for the sake of appearances. The dress came next. I slipped it off carefully, hung it back on the padded hanger, and draped a towel across the shoulders. Like it needed comforting. Or maybe I did. I stood in front of the mirror, bare feet on the cold tile. My hair was still pinned, but the curls had loosened. There were mascara smudges under my eyes, faint but visible. My mouth had a tightness to it I didn't recognize, like I'd been biting back something for hours. I looked tired. Not in the usual way. Not from lack of sleep. This was the kind of tired that sits in your chest. That hums in your bones. I poured a glass of water, drank half, then sat on the edge of the bed with my tablet. It powered on automatically, opening to the last file I had used. The wedding spreadsheet. Meticulous. Color-coded. Every vendor labeled. Every invoice tracked. Notes in the margins. Payment schedules. Emily's updates. My adjustments. It had taken over a year to build. Now I looked at it like it was a crime scene. I scrolled through the entries, slow and deliberate. There, 3 charges from the week before. $950, upgraded reception linens. $1,200, crystal glassware and charger set. $645, premium bar tasting. None of those had been discussed with me. All were paid with my card. My stomach clenched. I checked the timestamps. All within 48 hours of finalizing the budget. All approved by Emily, not me. I clicked into the shared email thread. Nothing. No notes. No apologies. No heads up. Just silent subtraction. I sat there, the screen glowing on my lap. My fingers hovered for a moment, then moved from instinct. I opened my banking app. Verified the charges. They were real. Processed. Cleared. Then I did something I hadn't done in years, I searched her name on Venmo. I told myself I was just curious. Just gathering facts. But truthfully, I was already past curiosity. Past shock. I was looking for confirmation. And I found it. Again. Another note to a bridesmaid. Margaret's paying. Don't even worry about it. Full glam secured. No shame. No gratitude. Just entitlement, dressed up in emojis. I set the tablet aside. For a long moment, I just sat in silence. No music. No TV. Just the hum of the air conditioner and the distant sound of traffic outside the window. This was the moment I thought I would cry. But I didn't. There were no tears left in me. Only stillness. And clarity. Because it wasn't just the money. It was the principle. The erasure. The gall of it. To spend my savings on things I hadn't agreed to. To sideline me from a day I helped create. To do it all with the quiet confidence that I wouldn't push back. And they were right, for a long time I hadn't. I had smiled. I had accommodated. I had swallowed disappointment like water. But tonight, I felt something shift. I wasn't angry. Not in the loud way. I was done. In the kind of way that sticks. The kind of done that makes you think clearly. That makes you plan. I picked up the tablet again, opened a new document. Not a letter. Not a speech. Just 3 short notes. One to the florist. one to the band, one to the bar service. Each message polite, professional, final. I saved them as drafts. Not out of hesitation, but intention. I wanted to send them in the morning. Let them feel the silence first. Let them wonder. By morning, the ballroom was cleared, the candles blown out, the roses beginning to wilt under the weight of their own beauty. I sat in bed, still in my robe, the tablet resting on my lap. The messages were ready. I had reread them twice, not to edit, just to remind myself, calm, clear, final. One click. Then another. Then a third. Send. 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 I closed the tablet and stood. The silence in the room wasn't heavy. It was clean. And then my phone started buzzing. First a text from Daniel. Hey, did something happen with the brunch? The florist says it was cancelled. Then another from Emily's mother. I'm not sure what's going on, but this is coming off a little unprofessional. Then Emily herself. Margaret, seriously? You're ruining the vibe of the whole weekend. And finally, the word that stuck. The one they all seemed to agree on. Petty. As if silence was petty. As if boundaries were petty. As if a woman quietly withdrawing from her own erasure was the problem. I set the phone down. Later that morning, I walked to the cafe across the street. I ordered a black coffee and sat by the window. Outside, the sky was overcast. A child in a tiny tuxedo chased pigeons across the sidewalk. His father called after him. Laughed. I watched them for a long time. When I got back to my room, the bouquet from the ceremony was sitting outside the door. A bellhop must have dropped it off. Cream roses, pale pink lilies, wrapped in tissue and cellophane. There was no note. I left it there. Instead, I opened the closet and pulled down the carry-on bag I had brought for the weekend. I packed slowly. Intentionally. Every item folded with care. No rush. No panic. Just presence. Just before noon, there was a knock at the door. I opened it halfway. It was my cousin Renee. She'd flown in from Houston. We hadn't spoken in years. Hey, she said, a little breathless. Do you have a minute? I nodded. She stepped in, glanced around, then sat gently on the corner of the bed like she wasn't sure she was allowed. I didn't know, she said. About the seating. Or the photos. Or any of it. I sat across from her. Quiet. She looked down at her hands, twisting a napkin she'd brought up from breakfast. I saw you by the door. During the dance. You looked alone. I let that sit. I should have said something, she added. I'm sorry I didn't. Her voice cracked a little on didn't, like she had been holding it in. I nodded once. Thank you. She looked up, surprised. I think she expected anger. Or a lecture. But I didn't have it in me. Not anymore. We sat in silence for a moment. Then she stood. If you ever come to Houston, she said, coffee's on me. And with that, she left. I zipped my bag and checked out of the hotel. No drama. No declarations. Just a quiet departure, as unnoticed as my arrival. On the ride home, I didn't play music. I let the road fill the space, tires against pavement, wind threading through the cracks in the windows. That night, I posted a single photo. It wasn't of me. Not the reception. Not the dress. Just the check. The one I had written 6 months earlier. Blurred account number. Signature visible. No caption. No explanation. By morning, it had dozens of comments. Some confused. Some supportive. Some shocked. I didn't reply to any of them. I wasn't making a statement. I was making space. The first thing I did when I got home was feed the cat. He meowed once, circled my ankles, then went straight to his bowl. He didn't care where I'd been. He just wanted me back. I dropped my bag by the front door, kicked off my shoes, and stood in the quiet for a long time. The house smelled faintly of lavender and something older, something like dust and time and memory. Everything was exactly where I left it. On the mantel above the fireplace, there were 6 framed photos. All of Daniel. His first school play. His graduation. His college acceptance. One from his first job. One of him and me at the beach, wind in our hair, years ago. I picked up the last one, the most recent. A formal portrait taken after he got engaged. His arm around Emily. Both smiling like magazine people. I looked at it for a long time. Then I turned it face down. I didn't do it out of spite. I did it out of clarity. Something had shifted in me that weekend. And it was time I started living like it had. I made tea. I sat in the kitchen. And for the first time in days, I let myself breathe without bracing for impact. Later that night, I pulled out a box from the closet. It was an old one, dusty, taped at the corners, tucked behind a stack of winter scarves. Inside, letters. Cards. School drawings. Documents. A life's worth of being someone's mother. At the very bottom, folded twice and yellowing, was a letter I hadn't seen in years. It was from Daniel's father. My ex-husband. He had sent it a few weeks before he died. I hadn't opened it back then. I was too angry. Too tired. Too done. But now I unfolded it. The handwriting was shaky but familiar. Margaret, it began. If you're reading this, then I guess I didn't get the chance to say it in person. I read slowly, line by line. He talked about regrets. About leaving. About Daniel. Then came the part that pulled the air from my lungs. There's something you never knew. Daniel, he isn't biologically yours. Emily was pregnant when we met. I told her we'd keep the baby, raise him as ours. I told you he was ours, and you believed me. You raised him like he was yours. God knows you were more of a parent to him than I ever was. My fingers trembled. The paper rustled. You gave him everything. I gave him nothing. I don't know what that makes me. But I know what it makes you, the only mother he's ever had. I read the letter twice. 3 times. And then I folded it neatly, placed it back in the envelope, and set it on the table. I didn't cry. I didn't feel betrayed. Not by him. Not anymore. Because what had been broken, the trust, the connection, that had happened long before I knew the truth. And in a strange way, the letter didn't destroy anything. It just confirmed it. I had loved a child that was never mine by blood. But I made him mine anyway. I nursed him through fevers. I stayed up with him before every spelling test. I saved for college. I paid for his braces. I cut crusts off sandwiches. I held him when he sobbed after his first breakup. I listened. I showed up. I built his world. And he had left me out of the pictures. I stood, walked to the living room, and began quietly taking the photos off the mantel. Not to throw them away. Not to erase him. But to make room for something else. Room for me. A week after the wedding, I hosted a dinner. Not a grand one. No rented linens, no floral archways, no seating charts. Just my own table, the one I used to fold laundry on, dressed with a simple cloth and a few candles I found in the drawer. I cooked all day. Nothing fancy, lemon roasted chicken, garlic potatoes, green beans with sea salt. Things I liked. Not what Daniel used to ask for. Not what anyone expected. Just mine. The guests were few. My neighbor, Mr. Henderson, who always waved when I brought in the trash bins. Claire, my old coworker from the ER, who once stayed an extra 2 hours just so I could leave early for Daniel's choir concert. Dina from the bookstore, who knew my favorite author without asking. And Renee, the cousin who'd found the courage to knock. They came with wine and laughter and no questions. And for the first time in a long while I felt seen. We talked about everything, and nothing. About the weather, about bad dates, about the lady at the pharmacy who always forgets her glasses. There was no drama. No silence that needed filling. No spotlight. Just presence. We ate slowly, passing bowls back and forth, pouring second glasses. Claire joked that my green beans should be illegal. Dina said she was going to steal the recipe. Mr. Henderson told a story about locking himself out of the house in his bathrobe. We held. At some point, someone brought out dessert, a berry cobbler I'd made that morning. Still warm. And then Claire raised her glass. To Margaret, she said, her voice steady. For reminding us that you don't have to be invited to someone else's table to build your own. Everyone clinked glasses. I smiled, quietly. I didn't say anything. Not right away. Because something was happening inside me, not loud, not sudden. But real. This wasn't a rebound. It wasn't a replacement for a family that had turned away. It was something else entirely. It was reclamation. And somewhere between the second helping of cobbler and the refilling of glasses, I found my voice. I lifted my own glass and said, to the ones who made room for me, not out of guilt, not out of obligation, but because they saw me standing. And that was enough. That night, after everyone had left and the last dish was drying on the rack, I sat at the table alone. Not lonely. Just full. I looked at the empty seat across from me, not the one Daniel used to sit in, but the one I had always kept open, hoping he might come back to it. I no longer needed to keep it waiting. I didn't erase him from my life. But I stopped writing him into every scene. The next morning, I opened the curtains wide. Let the light in. Made coffee. Sat with the newspaper, not scrolling through messages that never came. Daniel hadn't called. Not since the photo. Not since the check with my signature showed up in people's timelines. But I had. I had shown up. For myself. And this time I stayed for the whole meal. It came just after lunch. A slow, deliberate knock. Not hurried. Not loud. The kind of knock you use when you know you're not welcome, but you're hoping the door still opens. I wiped my hands on a dish towel and stood still in the kitchen, staring at the front door. 3 more knocks. Then silence. I opened it. Daniel. His suit was gone. So was the glow. He wore a hoodie, wrinkled, sleeves pushed up. His eyes were tired. Not red. Just dull, like someone who hadn't slept well in days. He opened his mouth, closed it again. Then tried. Hi, Mom. I didn't say it back. Instead, I stepped aside. He took it as permission and walked in, glancing around like the house might have changed without him. He paused when he saw the mantel. The photos were gone. All of them. His eyes lingered. But he said nothing. I motioned to the living room. Sit. He did. Carefully, like the couch might crack under the weight of what he'd brought with him. For a moment, neither of us spoke. The clock ticked. A car passed outside. Somewhere down the block, a dog barked twice and went quiet again. Finally, he sighed. I didn't come to fight. I nodded. Good. I don't understand what happened. One day everything was fine. Then you canceled the brunch. You posted that photo. People are still talking about it. He looked at me like I was supposed to explain myself. I didn't. So he kept going. Emily said you were upset about the seating. That it wasn't personal. Just logistics. Aesthetic choices. She said it got taken out of context. I raised an eyebrow. Taken out of context. He shifted in his seat. I didn't mean to hurt you. But you did, I said, my voice even. He looked down. I didn't think it would matter. There it was. I stood, walked to the hallway closet, and returned with a small box. I set it on the table between us. Opened it. Receipts. Contracts. Email printouts. Highlighted costs. My handwritten notes in the margins. Every dollar. Every adjustment. Every indulgence. I didn't speak. He reached in and pulled out a receipt from the florist. Another from the band. His face changed as he flipped through them. Then I handed him one last thing. The letter. His father's handwriting on aged paper. I said nothing while he read. His hands trembled slightly as his eyes moved line by line. When he finished, he looked up. You knew? I do now. He swallowed. So, you're angry because I'm not your biological son? No, I said, cutting him off gently but firmly. I'm angry because I raised you. Because I gave everything I had. And when the time came to honor that, you put me near the kitchen and let them act like I was invisible. He opened his mouth. Closed it. His shoulders dropped. I didn't know, he whispered. I thought it was fine. Emily said. I held up my hand. I'm not angry about Emily. She barely knows me. But you do. His eyes glistened. I messed up. Yes, I said. You did. He sat in silence. Then, quietly, can we fix this? I didn't answer right away. Instead, I stood, walked to the mantel, picked up one of the photos I had boxed the week before. Daniel at age 6, arms wide open, gap-toothed grin. I looked at it, then at him. I don't know, I said honestly. Fixing something assumes it's still the same shape. I think it needs to be something new. If you want it to exist at all. He nodded slowly, eyes down. I do. I walked him to the door. He turned back once, hoping I could see it in his face. But I didn't offer comfort. Not yet. Take the box, I said. That part belongs to you now. He took it. And I closed the door. Not with anger. Not with spite. Just with the weight of finally choosing myself. Behind me, the house was quiet. The kettle whistled softly. Sunlight spilled through the window, warm and golden. The cat curled against my ankle. I made tea. And for the first time, it tasted like peace. Thanks for listening. If this story found a quiet corner in your heart, don't forget to subscribe, and if you feel ready, share your own story in the comments. Your voice matters. It always has.